So it's an interesting path to expansion then that you guys had. You and correct me if I'm wrong at any point here, but it sounds like you started with multifamily and then you grew that business, and eventually when it was appropriate, you started taking various pieces of the operations in-house.
Yep.
And then very recently you pivoted slightly towards industrial to add that to your repertoire. That's not like a really common thing I feel like I see from a lot of people. I'm wondering what were your thoughts on that pivot? What caused you to look into industrial more thoroughly?
I'm going to give you a long answer. It's actually two separate questions. So one, why did you diversify? And then two, why did you pick this category, industrial outdoor storage?
Right.
We weren't looking for another type of real estate. It just sort of happened in 2016. I got a phone call from a friend of mine that used to run the largest national crane company. It's called Maxim Crane Works. They're known as Amquip locally here. And he had a real estate problem in Boston. They were being evicted from their yard. The local team there, the general manager, couldn't figure out where to move them. There were a lot of dynamics as to why it was a difficult relocation. So he asked me if I could help. We took a lot of effort. We moved them in 2017 to Revere. It's like moving from Philadelphia to Bensalem, or Philadelphia to Essington, because Revere is just north of Logan Airport, and the airport's north of the city rather than south of the city here.
Gotcha.
And so we did a few more of those with him. We did one in Nashville, one in Portland, one in Dallas. And at that point in time, my partner Matt had joined us. He now runs our industrial platform. He came over from another private equity firm, and we looked at it and said, gee, this is an interesting opportunity. It's not just a tenant-specific opportunity. There's a whole category of real estate that is sort of hiding in plain sight. Nobody really understands what it looks like, how it functions, what the tenant requirements are. So we went for it, right? We saw the opportunity and said, this is much more national, scalable, and differentiated than, being maybe a good, but just another developer of apartments and, mixed-use properties in Philadelphia. So the opportunity was sort of serendipitous, but what we did to take the opportunity and grow it into an entire platform, and probably the market leader in the country, and just give you a sense of scale. When we got into outdoor storage, we owned, let's call it $600 million of multifamily, almost all in Philly, a little bit in Pittsburgh. That grew to about $1 billion. It's now about $800 million, give or take. We now own $1.7 billion of outdoor storage. So
that's between here and 2016?
Yeah.
Wow.
So you said that's like the national leader.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know for sure, but we think it's one of the largest platforms. It's certainly the largest dedicated platform. There are other large real estate investors like Brookfield, Cerberus, Fortress, JP Morgan, Carlyle that have holdings in outdoor storage. Some of them are with us in the case of JP Morgan. But we think we're one of the larger, if not the largest portfolio, or series of portfolios. If you kind of put them all together, series of ventures into one large portfolio, and we are the largest that's dedicated on the industrial side to this low density outdoor storage. There are a lot of multifamily managers, and when I say managers, developers of multifamily, and just generally developers of residentially anchored mixed use kind of properties that had good track records, national teams, construction management capabilities, access to institutional capital or their own capital, who actually pivoted and added industrial development and acquisition as a strategy that rode alongside multifamily. MRP, locally in DC. One of the largest spec builders of apartments is Hanover. They're based out of Texas. They built two or three projects locally. They have an industrial division now. I mean, I could go on and give you lots of examples of people who sort of, I call it, jumped on the Me Too train and said, well, we do apartments. Industrial's also hot,
What year was this?
I mean, this is happening right now.
Yeah.
It's happening right now. We didn't jump into industrial outdoor store. First of all, what we do and what they do is very different. We buy low density industrial or develop it, mainly buy it. They're trying to build warehouses, right? Outdoor storage is very different than the warehousing business that you drive up Lehigh Valley. You see millions of square feet of white roofs of, Amazon and Walmart and, rooms to go, you name it, right? We don't do that. We do the support real estate. So the truck parking and the container stacking,
How big is it to even make sense for you guys? Like what's the average site?
So that's the other thing. We are, it's a little bit of a death by 1,000 paper cuts business. So we bought 100 and almost 90 properties. So do the math, 1.7 billion divided by 190, you're about $8 million, $9 million a deal. So imagine doing that in 30 states, 35 markets across the country. You could buy 10 Amazon warehouses and aggregate the same amount of, dollar volume of real estate. So
administratively, it sounds like
well, look, but remember, we have 2,000 apartments and probably 3,500 tenants, let's say in Philly and Pittsburgh. There's 60 people involved with that business. We own about 160 some of the 190 that we've purchased still. Okay. And they're in 26 or 7 states today. We have 20 people that work on that business, right? So most of these are single tenant, triple net lease properties.
So the management of a site is just...
Most of the sites, 3/4 of the sites require very little management per se. It's more asset management than property management. When we buy sites that are multi-tenant, where they're short-term and they're not necessarily triple net leases, part of our strategy is to kind of bring those into a single or maybe 2 tenants at most, triple net lease, setup.
What's a triple net lease?
So it's NNN triple net. It's net of taxes, insurance, and maintenance. Okay. So it's like a CVS.
So it's like the gross is your net.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so in our portfolio, we're 93% gross collections to NOI.
Okay.
Right. That 7% is largely concentrated in a handful of assets where the tenant might not pay all the taxes, as taxes go up, or, you've got an old roof, and a lot of times roof and structure and paving are on the landlord. And so the primary improvements to these properties are, whatever, kind of improvements on the ground, whether it's concrete or paving or crushed aggregate where you can kind of roll heavy machines on and not chew up the asphalt, the fencing, the lighting, the roof, maybe heavy electrical service, if, stuff like that. Very different than the apartment business where you're spending $5,000-$10,000 every 5 to 7 years to kind of upgrade your apartments. And the office business, forget about it. You could spend $150 a foot every 7 years, to swap office tenants out. It's a very low CapEx business, and that's really advantageous, in a lot of respects.